It's my great pleasure to say that Unknown Pleasures is coming up with two events. A tribute to Nigel Buesst that's happening at ACMI on July 6th, and a showcase of Salt Suck films, which is happening on July 8th. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to Bill Mousoulis, as always, Digby Houghton, and Rex Woods, especially about the Salt Suck showcase. Welcome all to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you
Thanks
for
for
having
having
Now, Rex, perhaps I'll start with you. Let's talk about Salt Suck. These films, what they're all about. I know they're sort of based in Reservoir, something like that, in Melbourne.
they're not based in Reservoir. That's where I had my studio of the last 4 years. I'm no longer there because of the classic Melbourne housing crisis where they demolished it and built a bunch of, or they're currently building a bunch of apartments. We are one step ahead of them though, because my partner with Salt Suck, Jade, who's also a filmmaker, we shot her debut feature film at the house because we got this, we'd been living in this beautiful old 60s brick house for like 4 years. And Jade was like, well, we're getting this opportunity because they're going to knock it down in front of us to tell a story here. So we got our vengeance back just a little bit, but no, I'm no longer living there.
Yeah.
And the films themselves that will be shown at Unknown Pleasures are from all over the place. I'd say yeah, they're actually none of them are set in Melbourne.
Well, let's talk briefly about the films without giving too much away, because obviously you want people to come along to the event.
Yeah. Well, in a kind of strange way to put it, I'm trying something a bit different, and it was sort of in line with communications with Bill that it just kind of I had the idea, but then Bill mentioned something about attention spans with short film festivals or short film showcases, and I agree because I've going to short film showcase in the past. I think there's something subconscious that happens with the audience when credits roll that you start to tune out. You go, okay, well, that's the end of that story. That's that happily ever after. I'm going to start to wind down. But so when you have credits rolling back to back to back, I think that's where you get this wane in the audience's attention. So for this, being that it's a sort of a showcase that Digby is picked from our catalog that kind of goes, it's pretty much almost 10 years. It's really 9 years of films that are going to play in chronological order. What I've done is I've stitched them all together. So the final thing is actually like an 110-minute, which is like a decent length feature film. And with just one set of credits rolling at the end. And yeah, it's just kind of an experiment, just a chance to kind of have an experiment with attention span and just being like, well, what does the story come if I've put all these films together? What narratives are going to come out of that? So that kind of gives you a broad scope of like how I'm sort of framing this showcase.
Okay. Well, Digby, I'll get you to come in here and tell me about what interests you in the Soul Suck films.
Yeah, so I first heard about Rex through a friend, and then he kind of invited me to one of Rex's annual events at his house in Reservoir. He kind of he built like a makeshift cinema in the back shed with sort of nice seats and like a pretty decent projector. And he kind of screened these like anthology films that were like uh kind of between like 10 or 14 hours maybe, and they were compilations of the past year for him working on sets and in film production. And I was really caught by what I saw, and particularly the kind of community that Rex was fostering in Reservoir and in the yard. And there were lots of like-minded people. And then recently I discovered how extensive Rex's catalog was and his time at kind of film school, and I thought it would be good to you know, put a showcase of the production company, if you want to call it that.
Hmm. Okay, very interesting. So, Rex, you must be really pleased at having your films being showcased at this special Unknown Pleasures event.
Oh, for sure. It's such an honor. I remember I when I first moved to Melbourne in to the beginning of 2021. And Bill and Digby, you're gonna have to help me with the exact film, but I went to my first Unknown Pleasures where you guys, it was like a 1940s Italian Australian film. Do you know the one I'm talking about? It was a love story. It's in black and white. It was really cool storyline. It starts in a swamp in like, uh,
That would be Clay by
yeah,
Giorgio Angimelli, which it's kind of shot in Montsalvat, in Eltham in Melbourne. And yeah, so Giorgio was, like an Italian migrant to Australia. And yeah, so, when we show films at Unknown Pleasures, we can delve into the past. And
mm,
Giorgio was making films in the 60s, and he was like a quintessential independent filmmaker, even though
totally,
he wouldn't have called himself that.
yeah. Especially
Yeah.
just independent Italian Australian filmmaker from that era. I'd never seen that from, and just like having those similar sensibilities of Italian cinema coming out of that time, but in an Australian landscape. I was like, whoa, this is so cool that this is alive now. And also, I was always also just struck by its just that you guys were putting on films that had that just like have light and an energy to them because and the more you guys speak to me, you'll probably get a sense I can get quite jaded about the film industry, and I think a lot of films just feel like they're quite flat. And I always really loved coming to Unknown Pleasures and your guys' selection. So yeah, very,
Cool.
very part of the program.
Very good.
Excellent. Well, let's first of all mention, and until we get to Nigel in a moment, July 8th is the screening of these films, and let's have the details. What's going to happen?
I can step in if you like.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's one of our regular Unknown Pleasures screenings at the Thornbury Picture House on. So this will be July the 8th, which is a Tuesday, and usually we like that later starting time, so it starts at 8:30, and yeah, Rex will be there, not anyone else from Salt Suck, I don't think, and yeah, there'll be a Q&A afterwards that Digby will moderate. And yeah, like I'm really pleased because like I mean, as I said a moment ago, that we like to honor older filmmakers. I call them my elders. And that's what the
Yeah.
screening for Nigel Buesst is all about, of course. And but we also love to kind of highlight younger filmmakers, and Digby coming along a couple of years ago and starting to program for us. He's put on a few younger filmmakers, people under my radar too. So yeah, that's the rundown of that screening. Yeah.
excellent to hear all that. All right, now let's talk about Nigel Buesst and the tribute screening to some of his films, etc. That's happening at ACMI on the 6th of July. So, Digby and Bill, let's hear all about Nigel Buesst.
Well, I guess I'll speak about it. Digby hasn't had much to do with the organizing of that screening. But yeah, Nigel, died last year, late last year in December 2024. He was born in 1938, so he died at the age of 87. And he was a true legend of Melbourne independent film. Like there's no doubt about it. He started in the early 60s as a young man to kind of make films, and he connected with that period, which was pre Renaissance, pre that new wave they called it, Australian cinema of Picnic at Hanging Rock and all that, and even pre Alvin Purple. I mean, we're talking about the 60s where, people like Giorgio Mangiamelli were there, but then there were all these, younger, kind of filmmakers in Melbourne, kind of situated in Carlton. And, Carlton was like the alternative suburb, pretty much. Places like Fitzroy were like working class, and didn't have that kind of hipster edge to them. And, Nigel in the 70s, taught film at Swinburne Film and TV School. In the 80s, he, pretty much started the St Kilda Film Festival and really kind of set it on its way. And he was always a great help to independent filmmakers in Melbourne, especially in those 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s as well. And then, he starts to slow down, but he still, would come along to Unknown Pleasures screenings and he'd support us quite a bit. And actually, one of the last screenings of his films that ever happened was a screening that Digby had. That was his cine club, and it happened in his backyard in April 2024
Yeah.
last year.
Come out
So that was
fighting.
like the last time I think one of Nigel's films played, and Nigel himself was there that night on crutches, and because he had a bad hip, and he was in the wars a bit with his health, but um, yeah, so Nigel was a great figure, and yeah, so basically ACMI are stepping in here. So we felt that the Thornbury Picture House was not a big enough venue for what we wanted to do. So ACMI are co-presenting with Unknown Pleasures, and yeah, we've basically Peter Tammer, who's another kind of legend of Australian kind of Melbourne film, has put together a compilation of a number of excerpts from Nigel's films. So even though he was a great supporter of indie filmmaking, he made his own films, lots of them. And so we've got a 70-minute compilation of excerpts from Nigel's films, and then we've got a bit of a panel discussion, and that's with like critics programmers like Adrian Danks and Jake Wilson. We've got a filmmaker, Nubar Gazarian, who was one of Nigel's students in the late 70s, I think. And then Nigel's two children, Amanda and Jason, will also be on the panel discussing and reminiscing about Nigel and his life. And yeah, so that's basically at ACMI on Sunday, July 6th at 2:30 p.m. And it's actually a free event as well, but people really need to kind of book their tickets, like kind of register for their tickets on the ACMI website. Mm.
Excellent to hear all that. Nigel made some so interesting films, very interesting films, and the compilation that I've had a look at, his films are just so interesting, different, unusual, clever, personal, insightful. I mean, there's a number
Uh,
of aspects.
yeah, absolutely. Like a bit like Peter Tammer's work, like there's an eclecticism to his work where, he was kind of part of that, Nouvelle Vague influenced kind of narratives of the late 60s, early 70s, and he contributed films like Bonjour Baldwin to that kind of movement.
Mm.
And then he made, kind of documentaries. He was fascinated. He really loved like jazz music, so he did a lot of jazz docos. And then he made these, experimental little films, as well. So
Mm.
and then he made one kind of big feature shot on 35 mil in the late 80s called Compo.
Oh, yeah.
And that screened at MIF and got a
Yep.
few screenings and things like that. And he always kept his hand in. He actually did a lot of like music, jazz documentaries that aren't like official films. So he was
Mm.
always kind of helping out that scene as well. So yeah.
Okay. Excellent to hear all that. Rex, can I bring you back into the discussion? Are there Were there any particular filmmakers' approaches to making the films that we're seeing in Salt Suck that may have influenced your approach?
Oh, yeah. So specifically filmmakers, or did you say filmmakers and or styles?
Both.
Well, yeah, because it's across 9 years, there's like quite a, in terms of inspiration, there's probably quite a large plethora. Um, when I was at film school, which film school covers the first two films you'll be seeing. I made, yeah, the first two films that will play on July 8th were made at film school. And when I was at film school, I was much less of a cinephile, I think, than I am now. I think just because of the, you know, sort of there was a little bit of hypocrisy and there was a little bit of what names you know. So I stuck to the films that really just stood out to me. And at that time, I would probably say Walkabout, and still to this day, Walkabout by Nicholas Roeg still is probably like I would say if I could see a film that's influenced all across the board, and especially there's two of Jade Valiantis's films that are going to play, and I know Walkabout had a really big impact on her as well, and I definitely could see that across the board. In in the more recent stuff, I think both Jade and I were very inspired by Todd Solondz and all of his films. Yeah, that was a really big one. Yeah, Todd Solondz stuff. Obviously, David Lynch is there in the background, kind of always as a sort of father figure to some degree of cinemas that sort of tries to reach at something into the unknown. What else would, in terms of styles, I think an embrace. There's something that I've sort of been playing with films for over the years is what I would call disintegration. And disintegration not just being what you see on screen, but what is off screen as well. And it's an approach that, you see it sort of been commercialized in many different ways, especially with my generation and how to promote material, whether it's music videos or people making brands. And I don't think many people call it disintegration, but I'm taking it more to a storytelling production point of view where the fact that there is so much saturation of movies, yet there is so little funding. Well, what are you to do as a filmmaker who just can't stop putting down this passion? And you sort of think, okay, you're 10 years in, trying to build up a professional craft for myself, but yet funding is so hard. Instead of being, putting your head in the sand and being like, well, woe is me, sort of embracing that notion. And I think like the film like Pelican Girls, I'm definitely going into a style of like almost trying to be naive, trying to feel like it could have been made by a 13-year-old's first film. But kind of like inspired by like those daggy kind of caravan park ads you see, or like local ads you see when you go to a movie theater and the ads play local stuff before the movie starts, and it'll be like a caravan park ad or something. Like that kind of stuff all adds into this idea of disintegrating cinema and just kind of embracing this sort of almost decrepitness and finding a sort of romance in what you have.
Very interesting to hear all that. It's a really great way of discussing your approach and filmmaking and so on. Excellent. So, Digby and Bill, so this is Unknown Pleasures, two major events coming up. What's after this?
Um,
Digby's got a program coming up in late July, so we're really
Ah,
kind of flying along at the moment. You can talk about that one, Digby.
yeah, so uh I think it's the late 80s. It might be 88 or 89 film written and directed by Daryl Delora called If Mr. Neil is Entitled to Be an Agitator about the QC sorry, whose name has passed me. S- uh is it Mike is it Michael Kirby or was it someone else? I'm not sure, but the QC
Yeah, possibly. Yep.
Kirby,
that
yes.
defended
Yeah. Yep.
Whitlam after the dismissal.
Yep.
Um, and we actually have had Peter Tammer assist with some kind of restoration. So it should be a quite a nice 4K cut of the what was then the DVD that Daryl gave to me. So that should be a really exciting kind of 50-minute presentation with Sue
Mm,
Maslin, the producer, director, star of Australian film, in
yeah.
attendance for May as well with Daryl. So that I think that's late July. I think it's July
At
28th maybe, or
29.
29. Yeah. So
Yep.
a few weeks after Rex's screening.
Mm.
Okay. We must talk about that because, yeah, Daryl and Sue are such important aspects of Australian filmmaking and so on. Oh,
Mm.
excellent. So great programs, great things that are happening. I mean, this Unknown Pleasures series of films and so on, it's so important to see these films that are rarely seen, that audiences don't often get a chance to witness. Rex's films and, of course, Nigel Buest's films, so important that our screen culture gets an airing like this.
I think
Absolutely.
just that, but also,
That's why we
yeah,
do it. Yeah.
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 also seeing it in the format of the cinema as well. I mean, it's really rare that you get to see short films um, in their correct sort of presentation, which is the cinema. Yeah, so I
Y-
think it
Yeah.
should be an
Mm.
exciting showing this.
Mm. Yeah.
Excellent to hear all that and what's forthcoming, and hopefully audiences will engage and will appreciate the Nigel Buest tribute on July 6th and Salt Suck showcase on July 8th, all part of Unknown Pleasures. Digby, Rex, and Bill, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Peter.
Thank you very
You're
much,
always a
Peter.
great support. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
All the best. See you later.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
See you guys.
See ya.
guys.